So I was thinking about what I could contribute to this discussion, and the people before me clearly know more about the actual logistics of achieving web accessibility than I do. As Clive hinted, when I had the idea for All is for All, I actually outsourced to a developer because I am not a developer. So the logistics I don't know about. All I know is that we used Bootstrap to create all of our buttons and things, which is an accessible system. And then we used WordPress, which again, as Clive said, strives to be accessible. So with that being said, what I believe I can contribute to this discussion is how web accessibility or accessibility in general contributes to a sense of belonging for people who have access needs. Because essentially that's really what accessibility achieves, is when something is accessible, people feel like they belong, and everybody really should feel like they do belong. Is this an okay position? I'm like here because then I can see my slides because I actually don't have any notes, but am I like cutting myself? Okay, it's fine. Cool. So on the left-hand side, yeah, that's left. On the left-hand side of this slide is an image of a woman named Rebecca Dubber. Some of you might know her. She's one of our models at All is for All, so that's what that image is. So I was just going to do a little like spiel about who I am. So as Laura said, I have always used a wheelchair. My knowledge about accessibility, if I'm honest, has kind of only really grown and come on in the last few years. And so when I started and came up with the idea of All is for All, I was really just thinking about the problems that I faced and how those would go about being solved. But if I'm honest, I have lived quite a sheltered life, and all of the accessibility problems that I have faced, whether it be tangible or otherwise, have been solved by other people around me. But obviously, as I grow up and become an adult, I kind of need to have self-agency and be able to solve those problems myself. So for me, navigating that transition, I came up with this idea. So I wanted to first talk about what it means to belong. So at All is for All, our focus is fashion. And so fashion is not really a place where you would see a lot of disabled people classically. In 2017, I went to Fashion Week for the first time as a media delegate. I was the only person in a wheelchair there, shock, horror, surprise, not. And I went there with a media platform called Vice, and I don't know if some of you know it, but they kind of create really cutting edge kind of content. It's things that you probably wouldn't normally talk about or hear. And so my pitch to the editor of Vice was that I wanted to write a column about my experiences being a round peg in a square hole at Fashion Week, because I had the belief that when I went there, I wouldn't fit in. And then I went there, and everybody behind the scenes was actually really weird because they were all super creative, and that's kind of what they did. And so my diversity and what made me different actually really complemented me in the space, which is how I kind of came up with the idea that maybe fashion could be a career for me and a career for other people with disabilities. And so I think one of the first things when we discuss belonging and when we discuss accessibility, it's not making the assumption from the outset before you know something or before you have experienced a space that you're not going to belong there. Whether that space be online or tangible, the mindset still stands. I'm clicking. Oh, there we go. So All is for All. So I'm just going to run through some of the accessibility things that we have taken into account that make us different to other online stores. So on the left-hand side of this image, there is an image of a woman in a wheelchair. Well, she's not in her wheelchair at the moment, but she uses a wheelchair. And in the image, she's sitting on a couch, and she's wearing an Ingrid Starnes dress. And if any of you aren't familiar, Ingrid Starnes is a New Zealand designer. So All is for All, it curates New Zealand fashion, and it looks at that fashion from an accessibility point of view. So for example, this dress has an invisible zip at the back, and that clasp that does the zip is a really small clasp. The size of that clasp is like a minor detail to people that aren't disabled, but to me it's actually the difference between independently dressing and not, because I can't physically do up the zip. So All is for All is kind of a website that integrates e-commerce for a larger vision about using fashion to achieve self-agency. Also, fashion is like the home of cultural relevance. It has a lot of impact on how we see others. So by making that space accessible, I believe that we'll see kind of accessibility be driven and achieved in other areas. And also I want to make like accessibility a sexy thing to do, and so fashion kind of helps me to do that. So some of the things that we do on All Is For All that make us accessible, first of all, every single one of our images has detailed alt text behind it. So alt text is what a screen reader reads out, and so we pride ourselves on ensuring that everything that you or I might see through our eyes is written down, so that a blind person can experience the images as equal to other people as anybody else. If you go on other websites like Lululemon and those kinds of big fashion websites and you use an alt text scanner, you'll find that on their images they'll have something like black leggings, and I don't know if you've ever been on Lululemon, but they've got like 2,000 frickin' pairs of black leggings. So that's really going to help me, isn't it? So we do that. Obviously, we also put all of the items that we curate, we put on models with disabilities, and as part of All Is For All, we have an agency attached to the company. So the models that we work with don't leave us after a shoot. They're actually signed to us. And this year we'll be taking 11 models to New Zealand Fashion Week to be cast in shows. So it's very exciting. So yeah, we do that. All of our contrast, so we only use black and white on our website. We have really strong, we use really strong contrast. And like Clive said, you know, I could sit here and say that we use really strong contrast for accessibility reasons, but if I'm honest, it was the best design choice. So it actually looks way better than if I was to use 800 colours, but it just worked out that actually it was the best choice for accessibility as well. And I think often when you make choices for accessibility, you'll then stand back and you'll be like, that was actually the right choice for everybody, not just like a quarter of the population. You know, wouldn't we rather all have a ramp rather than stairs? I've never climbed stairs in my life, but I imagine it's not a fun task. So, we do that, and then we do a whole bunch of other things. This part of our website is actually scaling and being improved. So if I'm honest, it's not where I want it to be at the moment, but we are working on it. We've got an audio translation of our garment descriptions. So the idea being that if someone wants to listen to a garment description, they can do that. And so they might listen for a number of different reasons. It might be because they don't feel like using a screen reader or don't have access to one, or it might be that they are dyslexic, so it's actually easier for them to listen. Or if you're a multitasker like me, you might want to online shop and do your uni assignment at the same time. So you might be like, it's really cool. But that part of our website needs to be improved, and so we are actively working on that. So those are some of the things that I do. And I want to say too that we're a startup, so we've done this in the most lean way possible. I used and it cost me no extra money, it just cost me extra time. But when you're willing and you want to invest the time, which you should, because like Clive said, it's a legal obligation, it actually doesn't cost you anything extra. I used a student, developing a web developer student who was also a female, yay for women in tech, and she did me the website and learned about accessibility in order to create this website and make it accessible. She didn't have a background, but we've created something that we actually ran by one of Zoe's colleagues. I think Zoe's in the room, and they do web accessibility like on a big scale and are real talented about it and way more knowledgeable than I am. And they said that we've done a good job. So that kind of shows that you don't need to know everything, you just need to have the will and the desire, and then that will take you to a certain point. I kind of said why fashion, but the reason why I think fashion is important on another level that I just quickly like to touch on is there is a very low employment rate in this country for people with disabilities. I don't know if you know that, but for those who don't know, 22% of people with disabilities are employed. So the gap, and around 70% of non-disabled people are employed. So the gap is around 40%. I failed maths, so you can do it yourself. But the reason why fashion is important to me on another level to tackle these bigger societal issues is that if somebody feels like they look good, they're more likely to be confident. You know, you walk into a job interview and you've all done it and you're feeling yourself in your outfit. You're like, damn, I look good. And so you're more likely to do well. So by making this website accessible and by giving people access to fashion, we're actually showing them that they can have the agency over themselves and they don't have to feel like they're limited to express themselves. If we give people power to express themselves, they're more likely to be successful. So that's why we chose fashion as well, other than it just being like a real cool industry. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that we're trying to make it cool. So this is Sophia, and Sophia is a tetraplegic, so she was in a riding accident. I'm not going to tell her story because it's hers to tell, but she's one of our models. And the video on the right-hand side, we were like talking about Sophia, about her loss of function, and then she goes to us, oh, but I can still pull the finger, watch this. And so she used her mouth to pull up her middle finger, and we put it on video and used that as one of our campaign ads. And the caption that we used with it was, you know, to anybody who thinks that disabled people can't be in fashion, we have this to say. So it's kind of the same thing about accessibility. Anybody who doesn't want to do it, you're actually missing out. It's not a choice anymore because there is so much space to make it cool and to make it something you're passionate about. If it's just a box that you want to tick, you're thinking about it wrong, because it actually shouldn't just be something that you want to, like, something that you feel like you have to do. You should feel inspired by it and be like, shit, I want to make the coolest website I can make, and accessibility is part of that because it's an opportunity to innovate. It's not just like, you know, a series that you have to do to like include a bunch of people in wheelchairs, even though we're real cool, but still. So the other thing about accessibility in tech is that it enables people to have success. So this is a big part of the equation, I think, and it was kind of like what Clive was saying. You know, the ability to go and buy what you want to buy, or the ability to experience what you want to experience, shouldn't be limited. So by making things accessible, we're aiding people in their success. But I think it's important that you know, for those who might not have experience with disability, the success is going to look different person to person. Everyone's experience with disability is different. I said in a quote the other day when I was asked by a reporter like what my goals were and what I wanted to do with this company, I said to them, you know, no matter how big I grow it, and no matter how much I can tell you about where we're going to go with AI and how much we're going to do, I'm always going to need somebody to tie my shoes because I'm disabled and that's what my experience means. So don't go like I would, and someone else tell me if Clive, tell me if I'm talking out of turn, because you know more than I do. But I would say when you're designing for accessibility, don't go in there and try and make disabled people conform to the able-bodied person's experience. Go in there and think about how you can design for them in a welcoming way that also means that able-bodied people have a good experience. It's not about trying to make able-bodied people fit in. It's about respecting that we're different and trying to find the best out of that. So when you don't make your website accessible, that's a barrier to belonging, and it's really annoying. So make your websites accessible. Otherwise, like Clive said, I won't go on them, and then you'll lose all my money. So, sorry. So I wanted to say, so on some level through technology. So just on the slide, there's a quote on the left-hand side that I'll read out, and then on the right-hand side is another image of our model Rebecca, and she's sitting in a wheelchair with her hand on her hip, and she's wearing this pink kind of like 60s vibe jumpsuit. It's really cool. It's by a brand called Beach Knickers. But I wanted to say that on some level, it is possible for everybody to break down barriers through utilising technology, but technology must run parallel with human skills or soft skills. I'm doing the bunny ears around soft because I actually think that human-to-human skills are harder than technology. I don't know if you've met many developers, but a lot of them probably need to work on the soft skill. Yeah. So what I mean by that is, it's real possible for me to put alt text on all my images and to read it out to you and you be able to go on there. But then when I speak and when I meet you, if I don't know about accessibility, if I can't talk to you about it, if when I speak to another person with a disability, I'm a dick, then I don't have I'm not relating to them on an authentic level. So it doesn't stop with technology. It's actually asking questions about who am I hiring? What does my office look like? When we speak about disability or when we speak about accessibility tech, what language do we use? Do we use the word disabled? Because is that the right word to use? I'm not saying you should sit there in a meeting for half an hour and just find out what's the right word to use. But I'm saying, accessibility is a full picture thing. Technology is one aspect of it. But if you're not carrying through with the human soft skills, then you've got a long way to go. And it actually, you might be in a position where you don't have a lot of money to make your website accessible on a larger level, but if you're coming in with the will and desire and you actually are owning up to that and you're saying, I am working on this, that's better than you just denying it and not actively trying to fix it. So it's really important that your customer service and your actual experience for people with disabilities in a whole picture level is positive. And then I always use this little flow chart when I do little talks. I've used it. Oh, golly, sorry. I have dexterity problems. Sorry. I use it every time that I do a talk, and I kind of want to apply it here. I don't know if it will work, but we'll see. So my company and my view kind of runs off this flow chart. So at the top of the flow chart is representation, so through continual representation. So whether that representation pertain to you as, for me it pertains to making sure that our models are pictured in magazines all the time. One of our models has just been in Fashion Quarterly, which is a big New Zealand fashion magazine, and a couple of them were just in the Herald. And so my goal is to make sure that international media continually represents people with disabilities. So that's the first step. I think that representation flows on to self-confidence. So when somebody is represented, the other people who can empathise or can see themselves in that person are able to gain self-confidence and able to feel like, yes, I can do it, like there's other people like me out there. From self-confidence, you have the development of aspiration and ambition, because when somebody is confident, they're more likely to develop goals for themselves. And a person without goals isn't going to go anywhere. Once they have goals, they're more likely to seek out opportunities, and then with those opportunities, they feel like they belong. And so the way I'm going to tie this in with technology is that I think that at every single step of this flowchart, technology can assist in that, because you have things like, if we can represent more disabled people as developers, if we can represent more women as developers, just got to tie it in, sorry. At every single step, technology is relevant to creating a culture of belonging, because technology is something that lets people in. And whether or not that be tangible technology, like my wheelchair runs off a Bluetooth motor, and if I didn't have it, I wouldn't be here today. So technology is super relevant to achieving belonging, and that's kind of what I wanted to offer you today, and I think that's it.